I thought betrayal would come with a warning sign, a red flag, a siren, something. Instead, it arrived with champagne glasses clinking and my sister's lipstick on my fiancé's collar. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is how hot the fire burns inside you while you're waiting for it to cool. By the time I walked into Madison's rehearsal dinner at Pearl Bay Resort, I'd been simmering for exactly 7 months and 12 days. Just long enough for the perfect plan to take shape. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia, and until 7 months ago, I had everything figured out. I worked as a financial analyst at Horizon Financial Group, lived in a downtown loft in Cedar Cove, and was engaged to Ryan, who I'd been with since college. We were 90 days away from our wedding at Willowbrook Estate, a historic mansion with gardens that bloomed exactly when I'd planned to walk down the aisle. The day everything fell apart began normally enough. I'd left work early to meet with Zoe, our wedding planner, to finalize the menu. But when she called to reschedule due to a family emergency, I headed home instead, looking forward to an unexpected quiet evening with Ryan. Except Ryan's car wasn't in our building's parking garage. Madison's Audi was. My sister's car shouldn't have been there. Madison was supposed to be at her gallery downtown, hosting an exhibition of local artists. We'd texted about it that morning. She'd asked if I could drop by. I'd promised to try. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Ryan was giving her a ride somewhere. Maybe she'd stop by to drop off the bridesmaid dress samples she'd promised. My key turned, in the lock with a soft click. The apartment was quiet, but not empty. 2 wine glasses sat on the coffee table. Madison's designer jacket was draped over one of our dining chairs. "Madison?" I called out, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. "Ryan?" No answer, but I heard movement from our bedroom. A soft laugh I recognized instantly as my sister's. Then Ryan's voice, too low to make out the words. People talk about out-of-body experiences, but I've never understood what they meant until that moment. I felt myself walking down the hallway, my hand pushing open the bedroom door, but it was like watching someone else do it. Someone braver, someone who was prepared for what was on the other side. Ryan and Madison were tangled in our sheets. The sheets I'd bought last month during the home goods sale, 800 thread count Egyptian cotton in a shade of blue that Ryan had said brought out my eyes. "Olivia!" Madison scrambled to cover herself. Ryan just stared, frozen in place, his expression shifting from shock to guilt in the span of a heartbeat. "What is this?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, too calm, too controlled. "It's not," Ryan started, then stopped. Even he couldn't say it's not what it looks like with a straight face. Madison clutched the sheet higher. "Liv, we were going to tell you." "When?" I stepped further into the room, scanning the familiar space that now felt alien. "After the rehearsal dinner, during the honeymoon?" "After the wedding," Ryan said quietly. "We didn't want to hurt you." I actually laughed. A sharp, broken sound that surprised even me. "After the wedding? You were going to wait until after I married you to tell me you're sleeping with my sister?" Madison started crying. She'd always been good at timing her tears for maximum effect. "It just happened, Liv. We never meant—" "How long?" I cut her off. They exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time mistake. 4 months, Ryan finally admitted. 4 months. While I'd been taste-testing wedding cakes and addressing invitations, they'd been— "Get out," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Both of you. Get dressed and get out of my apartment." "Olivia, please, we need to talk about this." Ryan reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "The ring." I held out my palm. Give it back." He hesitated only a moment before sliding the 2-carat diamond off my finger. It caught the afternoon light as it passed between us, throwing tiny rainbows across the wall. I'd once thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. They dressed in uncomfortable silence, Madison sniffling periodically while Ryan kept trying to catch my eye. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. That my sister, my only sister, who'd been my maid of honor, who'd helped me choose the ring now burning a hole in my pocket, could do this. "We should talk when you've calmed down," Madison said, as they shuffled past me toward the front door. "As a family." "Family?" I repeated the word like I was learning a foreign language. "Is that what we are?" Ryan reached for me again. "Olivia." "Don't touch me." I stepped back. Ever again. After they left, I locked the door and slid down against it until I hit the floor. I expected to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Instead, I felt nothing but a strange, icy clarity. I pulled out my phone and called Zoe, our wedding planner. "The wedding's off," I said when she answered. "What? Olivia, what happened?" "Ask my sister. She's sleeping with my fiancé." The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. "I need you to cancel everything. Today." To Zoe's credit, she didn't ask questions. She promised to handle it and asked if I needed anything else. "Yes," I said after a moment. "Don't refund the deposit on Willowbrook. Not yet." I wasn't sure why I said it. Some instinct told me to hold on to that piece, even as everything else crumbled around me. The days that followed passed in a blur. Ryan moved his things out while I was at work. My mother called incessantly, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly frustrated when I didn't pick up. "Olivia, sweetheart, we need to talk as a family. Madison is devastated. She never meant for this to happen. Love is complicated sometimes." Love is complicated. As if that explained everything. As if loving your sister's fiancé was just an unfortunate coincidence, like showing up to a party in the same dress. I finally answered on the 4th day when my father called instead. "Olivia," he said, his voice serious. "Your mother and I are having dinner tonight with Madison and Ryan. We'd like you to join us." Why would I do that? Because we're family, and families work through these things together. Work through. I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Dad, she's sleeping with my fiancé, with the man I was going to marry. How exactly do you suggest we work through that?" My father sighed. "Sometimes these things happen, Olivia. It's unfortunate, but Madison and Ryan, they're in love, and with the baby." "The what?" The silence on the other end of the line told me everything. "Madison is pregnant," my father finally said. "That's part of what we need to discuss tonight. As a family." The room spun around me. Madison was pregnant, with Ryan's baby. While I'd been planning our wedding, picking out china patterns and writing my vows, they'd been planning their own future. "I'll be there," I said and hung up. The dinner was at my parents' craftsman house in the suburbs where we'd grown up. Walking up the familiar steps felt like visiting a place I'd only seen in pictures, recognizable but not mine anymore. Madison opened the door, her face puffy from crying, one hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. Ryan stood behind her, his arm around her waist. "Olivia." Madison reached for me. "Thank you for coming." I stepped past her without a word. My mother hovered in the dining room, nervously arranging flowers. My father stood at the head of the table, scotch in hand. The whole scene was surreal, like walking into a play where everyone knew their lines except me. "Drink?" my father offered. I nodded, accepting the glass of white wine he poured. We all sat down at the table, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Madison finally broke it. "We're getting married," she announced, her hand still on her stomach, "at Willowbrook, next month." The wine glass froze halfway to my lips. "What?" "It's perfect timing, actually," my mother said, her voice unnaturally bright, "since everything was already booked and we'd lose all the deposits otherwise." "You're taking my wedding venue?" I set the glass down carefully, afraid I might otherwise throw it. "It makes the most sense financially," Ryan said, not meeting my eyes. "And with the baby coming." "The baby," I echoed. "How convenient." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair. We didn't plan this." "Which part? Sleeping with my fiancé or getting pregnant?" "Olivia," my father's tone was warning, "that's enough. What's done is done. We need to move forward now, as a family." I looked around the table, at Madison's tears, at Ryan's guilty face, at my parents' pleading eyes. They expected me to forgive and forget, to play the supportive sister and daughter, to smile and wish them well in the venue I'd chosen with the man I'd loved. "No," I said, standing up. "This isn't how family treats each other. Family protects each other. Family doesn't steal your happiness and then expect you to celebrate their betrayal. Please, Olivia." Madison reached for my hand across the table. "I love him. We love each other." I looked at her, really looked at her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My little sister, who I'd protected and loved all her life, who was now carrying my fiancé's child and planning to marry him in the venue I'd chosen. "Congratulations on your perfect little family," I said, grabbing my purse. "I hope you're very happy together." I drove away from my childhood home with no particular destination in mind. My phone buzzed with messages I wouldn't read. They thought this was the end. Poor Olivia, running away to lick her wounds. But they were wrong. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I found myself pulling into Nathan's driveway. Nathan had been my friend since college, the one person who had always seen through my sister's drama and Ryan's charm. He opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. "I need your help," I whispered against his shoulder. "Anything," he promised. "What do you need?" I pulled back to meet his gaze. "I need to get Willowbrook back. 6 weeks can change everything." I sat in Mark's office at Horizon Financial, watching him review the proposal I'd submitted. My boss's eyebrows rose higher with each page he turned. "Olivia, this is exceptional work," he said, setting down the report. "You've secured Reynolds as a client?" I nodded, thinking of the sleepless nights and endless coffee that had fueled my pitch to the notoriously difficult Reynolds account. "Yes, and Wilson is considering our offer as well." "Considering?" With these projections, they'd be fools not to sign. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying me over steepled fingers. "You've been different lately. Focused." "I've had fewer distractions," I said simply. My phone buzzed with a text. Madison again. I silenced it without looking. Since the disastrous family dinner, my sister had been relentless in her attempts to fix things. My parents alternated between guilt trips and pleas for understanding. Ryan had finally stopped trying after I blocked his number. "Well, whatever's driving this new focus, I'm impressed," Mark said. "The partnership committee meets next month. Keep this up, and your name will definitely be in the conversation." Partnership. 6 months ahead of my 5-year plan. Once, that would have been the most important thing in my world. "Thank you," I said, rising from my chair. "I appreciate the opportunity." "Speaking of opportunities," Mark called as I reached the door. "How's the house hunting going? You mentioned looking at properties in Cedar Heights." I smiled, thinking of the meeting I had scheduled for that afternoon. Actually, I'm viewing a property today that I'm very interested in. After work, I met Nathan at the Lighthouse Cafe, our usual spot. He was already there, laptop open, papers spread across the table. "It's happening," he said without preamble as I sat down. "The owner of Willowbrook called me back. He's willing to meet tomorrow." I nearly spilled my coffee. "Seriously? I thought the property wasn't for sale." Nathan grinned, turning his laptop to show me the email. "Everything's for sale at the Gay. Right price. And Willowbrook has been operating at a loss for the past 2 years. The wedding venue business keeps it afloat, but barely." "How do you know all this?" "I may have called in a favor from Tessa in accounting. She dated the owner's son in college." I stared at the screen, hardly daring to believe it. Willowbrook Estate, the historic mansion and gardens where I'd planned to get married, where Madison and Ryan were now planning their wedding, might actually be within my reach. "There's something else you should see," Nathan said, pulling up a social media page. Madison's latest post filled the screen. A photo of her and Ryan standing on Willowbrook's famous rose terrace, her small baby bump visible under a flowing dress. The caption read, "59 days until we say I do at our dream venue. Blessed beyond measure, die baby on board." "They don't know, right?" I asked, sipping my coffee to hide my expression. "That I'm trying to buy Willowbrook? No one knows except us. And the owner." Nathan closed his laptop. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Olivia? Once you sign those papers." I thought about Madison and Ryan planning their perfect day in the venue I'd chosen. About my mother's voice messages insisting that everything happens for a reason, and that I should be happy for them. About the baby that would make us all family forever, tying me to their betrayal for decades to come. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady. "More than sure." My phone rang, my mother this time. I declined the call. "They're going to hate you for this," Nathan said quietly. I met his eyes across the table. "They already do. They just pretend they don't." The next week passed in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and legal consultations. I sat in my lawyer's office, pen hovering over the final document that would make Willowbrook Estate mine. "Once you sign," my lawyer said, "the estate is yours. All operations, bookings, and management will be at your discretion." I signed my name with a steady hand, feeling a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. It was done. Willowbrook was mine. Walking out of the office, I bumped into Tessa from accounting. "Olivia, I was just heading to your office," she said. "Did you hear about Madison and Ryan?" My stomach tightened. "What about them?" "Their wedding venue canceled on them. Something about new ownership and policy changes." Tessa's eyes were wide with gossip. "Madison's devastated. She's been posting tearful updates all morning." I forced a sympathetic frown. "That's terrible." "I know, and with the baby coming." And Tessa lowered her voice. "Your mom called the office looking for you. Said Madison really needs her sister right now." "I'm sure she does," I murmured. Back at my desk, I opened my email to find the first official communication from Willowbrook's manager, now my employee. He was requesting guidance on how to handle existing bookings, specifically mentioning a cancellation that had caused significant distress to the clients. My phone lit up with texts from my mother. "Family emergency. Madison needs you. Call me now." I typed back, "In meetings all day. Can't talk." She replied instantly, "This is important, Olivia. Madison lost Willowbrook. She's hysterical. The doctor is worried about the baby." I set my phone down, trying to ignore the twinge of guilt. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? For them to feel a fraction of the pain they'd caused me? That evening, I stood on the grounds of Willowbrook, my property now. The gardens were immaculate, the historic mansion grand against the setting sun. Workers were setting up for a wedding scheduled for the weekend, a booking I'd decided to honor, unlike my sisters. I walked through the rose terrace where Madison and Ryan had taken their announcement photo, past the gazebo where I'd planned to say my vows, and into the grand ballroom where my reception would have been. Everything was just as beautiful as I remembered, but it felt hollow somehow. Nathan's car pulled up the long driveway. He found me in the ballroom, standing alone. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. "How does it feel?" "Strange," I admitted. "I got what I wanted, but..." "But?" I turned to face him. "Madison's devastated. My mother says the doctor is concerned about the baby." Nathan studied me carefully. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. "They hurt me. They deserve this." "Olivia," Nathan's voice was gentle. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here?" I walked to the wall of windows overlooking the gardens. They took everything from me. My fiancé, my future, my family's support. Now I've taken something from them. "And then what? You're going to run a wedding venue out of spite?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. The plan had been simple. Buy Willowbrook, cancel Madison and Ryan's wedding, make them feel the pain of having their dreams snatched away. But now that I'd done it, I felt strangely empty. "I don't know," I admitted. My phone rang again. This time, it was Chloe, my other close friend who'd been supportive through the whole ordeal. "Olivia, where are you?" she asked when I answered. "At Willowbrook. Why?" "You need to check Madison's Instagram, now." I pulled up the app and felt my stomach drop. Madison had posted a tearful video cradling her baby bump, explaining how their dream venue had been ripped away from them without explanation. The comments were filled with outrage and support. Justice for Madison was trending locally. "She's playing the victim," I said, my voice tight. Again. "There's more," Chloe said. "Your mom is hosting a blessing ceremony for them at your parents' house this weekend. Everyone's invited to help heal the negative energy around their wedding plans." I hung up and turned to Nathan. "They're turning this around already, making themselves the victims." "What did you expect?" he asked. "That they'd admit they deserved it?" I hadn't expected anything beyond the momentary satisfaction of knowing I'd ruined their plans. But Nathan was right. What was the end game? "Here." My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "I know it was you. We need to talk." The Lighthouse Cafe was busy for a Tuesday morning, but I'd arrived early enough to secure our usual corner table. Nathan sat across from me, scanning the documents I'd brought. "You're really going through with this?" he asked, looking up from the renovation plans for Willowbrook. "The East Wing needs updating anyway," I said, stirring my coffee. "And the gardens could use a refresh, the Rose Terrace especially." The Rose Terrace Madison and Ryan used for their announcement photos. I shrugged. Pure coincidence. Nathan wasn't buying it. And the timing? Starting renovations exactly 3 weeks before their rescheduled wedding date? The contractors had an opening. I kept my expression neutral. It would be irresponsible not to take advantage of it. The truth was more calculated, of course. After canceling Madison and Ryan's original booking at Willowbrook, I'd learned they'd scrambled to find a new venue. Through Tessa's gossip network, I discovered they'd managed to book Pearl Bay Resort for a slightly later date, less prestigious than Willowbrook, but still acceptable for the society wedding they were planning. What Madison didn't know was that I'd started the process of buying Pearl Bay Resort too. Not the whole property, that was beyond even my newly increased salary, but enough shares to gain influence over their booking policies. It was taking longer than I'd hoped, but I was making progress. "Olivia," Nathan's voice pulled me back to the present. "When does this end?" Before I could answer, a familiar voice called my name. I looked up to see Madison standing by our table, her pregnancy now clearly visible at 5 months. "I thought it was you," she said, one hand resting protectively on her bump, her default pose these days. "Can we talk?" Nathan gathered the renovation documents, sliding them into my portfolio. "I should get back to work. Call me later." I nodded, watching him leave before gesturing to the empty chair. "Sit." Madison eased herself down, looking tired and drawn despite her carefully applied makeup. "You bought Willowbrook." It wasn't a question, so I didn't treat it as one. I sipped my coffee and waited. "Why?" she finally asked. "To hurt us? Does it matter?" "Of course it matters." Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. She lowered it again. "Is this your revenge? Taking our wedding venue?" "Your wedding venue?" I set my cup down carefully. "It was my wedding venue first, Madison. The one I chose for my wedding to Ryan. Remember that wedding? The one that didn't happen because my sister was sleeping with my fiancé?" She flinched. "I've apologized 1,000 times, Olivia. What else can I do? We didn't plan for this to happen." "Which part didn't you plan? The affair? The pregnancy? Or getting caught?" Madison's eyes filled with tears. She'd always been able to cry on command, a talent that had gotten her out of trouble countless times growing up. "I know you're hurt. You have every right to be. But this, buying Willowbrook, canceling our wedding, it's not going to change what happened." "No," I agreed. "Nothing will change what happened. But actions have consequences, Madison. Consider this yours. And the baby? Your niece or nephew? Do they deserve consequences too?" It was a low blow, using the baby as emotional leverage. Typical Madison. "Don't worry," I said, gathering my things. "I hear Pearl Bay Resort is lovely this time of year." Her face paled. "How did you know we booked Pearl Bay?" I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "Congratulations on finding a new venue. I hope the third time's the charm." "The third?" Madison's eyes widened. "Olivia, what have you done?" I left her sitting there, her question hanging in the air. The truth was, I hadn't done anything to their Pearl Bay booking. Yet. But she didn't need to know that. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of work and planning. The renovations at Willowbrook were proceeding on schedule. My bid for shares in Pearl Bay Resort was inching forward, though slower than I'd hoped. And at Horizon Financial, I was on track for the partnership announcement next month. My mother's calls had transitioned from pleading to cold fury. My father had called exactly once, his message brief. "Your sister is on bed rest due to stress. I hope you're satisfied." I wasn't satisfied, not even close. But I was committed to seeing this through. The invitation to Madison and Ryan's rehearsal, dinner arrived by courier on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I stared at the cream envelope, embossed with silver lettering. "Madison and Ryan, a love story begins." Inside was a handwritten note from Madison. "Please come. We need to talk. For real this time." I set it aside, turning back to my computer. On the screen was an email from my contact at Pearl Bay Resort, confirming that renovations would begin in the beach pavilion area, where Madison and Ryan's ceremony was scheduled, starting next week. It wasn't the full ownership stake I'd been working toward, but it was enough to disrupt their plans once again. My phone rang. Chloe. "Did you get the invitation?" she asked without preamble. "To the rehearsal dinner?" "Yes." "Are you going?" I glanced at the invitation, then at the email on my screen. "I'm considering it." "Olivia?" Chloe's voice turned serious. "I ran into Ryan today." My hand tightened around the phone. "And?" "He looks terrible. Thin, stressed. There are rumors he's having financial problems." "Not my concern." "There's more," she hesitated. "He asked about you. Wanted to know if you were seeing anyone." A bitter laugh escaped me. Checking if I've moved on? Classic Ryan. No, it wasn't like that. He seemed, I don't know, regretful. He should be, I said flatly. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, the invitation staring back at me. The rehearsal dinner was in 2 days, at Pearl Bay Resort, the same resort where construction would begin the day after, potentially derailing their wedding plans for the second time. Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation, to let the construction commence without warning. But another part, a part I'd been trying to silence for months, wanted to see their faces when they realized what was happening. Wanted to witness the moment they understood that they weren't going to get their perfect happy ending after all. I sent a brief RSVP. I'll be there. The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived with perfect coastal weather. Calm seas, gentle breeze, the kind of sunset that usually graced the covers of Cedar Cove's tourism brochures. I dressed carefully, a sleek black dress that showcased the results of 6 months of rage-fueled workouts, hair styled in loose waves, makeup subtle but flawless. Nathan had offered to come as my +1, but this was something I needed to do alone. Pearl Bay Resort's dining terrace was decorated with fairy lights and white roses, Madison's favorite. As I approached, I could see the small gathering of family and close friends. My parents, looking tense despite their formal attire. Ryan's parents, whom I'd once almost called my in-laws. A few mutual friends who looked distinctly uncomfortable when they spotted me. And at the center of it all, Madison and Ryan. She in a flowing white maternity dress, he in a sharp suit, both wearing matching expressions of shock as I walked in. Olivia, my mother recovered first, hurrying over. You came. I was invited, I replied, accepting the glass of champagne a server offered before remembering I'd need a clear head for what was coming. I set it aside, untouched. Madison made her way to me, moving carefully with her now prominent baby bump. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice uncertain. It means a lot. Does it? I looked past her to Ryan, who was watching us with an unreadable expression. Yes. She touched my arm lightly. We want to make things right, Liv. That's why we wanted you here tonight. Before I could respond, Ryan's father called for everyone's attention, announcing it was time for toasts. I settled into a chair at the back, watching as various friends and family members rose to wish the couple well. My father spoke about the importance of family forgiveness. Ryan's mother gushed about the baby, their little blessing. Then Ryan stood up, glass in hand, and looked directly at me. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady but his hand shaking slightly. Especially Olivia. A hush fell over the gathering. Madison looked confused, clearly, not expecting this deviation from their planned speeches. 7 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life, Ryan continued. I betrayed someone who loved and trusted me, someone who deserved better. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father stared at his plate. I told myself it was love, Ryan said, still looking at me. That what Madison and I had was special, that it justified what we did. But the truth is, nothing justifies betraying someone the way we betrayed Olivia. Madison's hand went to her stomach, her instinctive defense mechanism. Ryan, what are you doing? He ignored her, setting down his glass. There's something else everyone should know, something I've been hiding. The air seemed to freeze around us. This wasn't part of my plan. This wasn't what I'd expected at all. The baby, Ryan's voice cracked. It's not mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Madison's face drained of color. My parents looked stricken. Ryan's mother put a hand to her mouth in shock. What are you talking about? Madison finally whispered. Of course it's yours. Ryan shook his head. I've known for weeks. The timing didn't add up, so I had a DNA test done with that strand of hair you gave me for the baby book. The results came yesterday. Madison stood up, swaying slightly. You're lying. Why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of lying. Ryan turned to face the stunned gathering. The baby is Jason's, Madison's coworker. We've been having problems for months. She turned to him when things got difficult. My mind reeled. Jason, the name was vaguely familiar. A guy from Madison's gallery, someone she'd mentioned in passing. The same way she'd once mentioned Ryan, back when he was just my boyfriend. That's not true. Madison was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The baby is yours, Ryan. Tell them you're just upset. Tell them... I have the test results, Madison. Ryan's voice was tired, defeated. It's over. He turned back to me. I'm sorry, Olivia. For everything. You didn't deserve any of this. Then he walked out, leaving Madison standing alone at the head table, her perfect rehearsal dinner in shambles around her. My mother rushed to Madison's side. My father followed, throwing me an accusatory glance as he passed, as if somehow this too was my fault. I sat frozen in my chair, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't my revenge. This was something else entirely, a twist I hadn't seen coming. Madison's sobs echoed across the terrace as guests began to awkwardly disperse. The perfect couple, the perfect baby, the perfect wedding, all revealed as elaborate fictions in the span of 5 minutes. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. This was a far more complete destruction than anything I could have orchestrated with venue cancellations and renovations. Instead, I felt hollow. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Pearl Bay Resort. The shares I'd been trying to acquire had become available. With one tap, I could confirm the purchase and ensure the construction that would disrupt Madison's third attempt at a wedding venue. I stared at the screen, then at my sister, still crying in my mother's arms, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. My finger hovered over the confirm button. Olivia, wait. Ryan's voice stopped me in the resort parking lot. I turned to find him leaning against his car, looking as hollow as I felt. That was quite a performance, I said, keeping my distance. Was any of it true? All of it. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveled now compared to his polished appearance earlier. I found out about Jason 3 weeks ago. The DNA test results came yesterday. So Madison cheated on you after you both cheated on me? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. Karma works in mysterious ways. I deserved it, Ryan said simply. But I wanted you to know. You deserved the truth, at least. My phone buzzed again, a reminder about the pending share purchase. One tap and I could complete my revenge plan, disrupting whatever remained of Madison and Ryan's wedding. Why tell everyone? I asked. Why not just end things privately? Ryan looked back toward the resort, where we could still hear the muffled sounds of the chaos he'd left behind. Because I'm tired of the lies. All of them. The lie that Madison and I were this perfect couple. The lie that what we did to you was somehow justified by true love. The lie that I was ready to be a father. He stepped closer, close enough, that I could smell the familiar scent of his cologne, the one I'd given him last Christmas. And because I wanted you to see that you won, Olivia, without having to lift a finger. Won? I repeated. Is that what you think this is? A competition? Isn't it? Buying Willowbrook, investigating Pearl Bay Resort? Don't look surprised. I have friends in finance, too. You've been 3 steps ahead of us this whole time. I started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point of pretending now? You hurt me, I said simply. Both of you. I wanted you to feel what that was like. Ryan nodded. We did. And now Madison's world is falling apart. And mine too. Are you satisfied? Was I? The question hung between us in the cool evening air. My phone buzzed again in my hand, the share purchase waiting for confirmation. One tap, and I could deliver the final blow to whatever wedding plans remained. "I should go," Ryan said when I didn't answer. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry, Olivia. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. You deserved better." He walked away, shoulders slumped, a shadow of the confident man who had once promised to love me forever. I watched him go, then looked down at my phone. The confirmation screen glowed up at me, waiting. With a deep breath, I pressed cancel instead. Inside the resort, the aftermath of Ryan's announcement was still unfolding. Most guests had tactfully departed, leaving only my parents, Ryan's shell-shocked parents, and Madison, who sat alone at a table by the windows overlooking the ocean, her makeup streaked down her face. My mother spotted me first. "Haven't you done enough?" she hissed, blocking my path. "Are you happy now?" "This wasn't me," I said quietly. "I had nothing to do with Ryan's announcement." "But you're glad, aren't you?" My father joined her, his expression hard. "Glad to see your sister suffering." I looked past them to Madison, who seemed smaller somehow, diminished in her flowing white dress. "No," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I'm not glad." I moved past my parents toward Madison. She didn't look up as I approached, her gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice raw from crying. "No." I sat down across from her. "Is it true? About Jason?" Madison's hand went to her stomach, but this time the gesture seemed less performative, more protective. "Yes." "How long? Does it matter?" She finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. "You got what you wanted. I lost Ryan, the wedding's off, and now everyone knows I'm—" Her voice broke. "A cheater, just like I was with you." "Was any of it real?" I asked. "You and Ryan?" Madison was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. "I thought it was," she finally said. "In the beginning. He was everything I'd always envied about your life, Olivia. The successful boyfriend, the perfect future. Then it became real, at least for me. But for Ryan..." She shook her head. "I think he was just trying to convince himself he hadn't made a horrible mistake." "And Jason?" "Jason was there when Ryan started pulling away, when he started having second thoughts about the baby, about us." Madison wiped fresh tears from her cheeks. "I was scared of being alone." The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison had feared abandonment so much she'd created exactly the situation she was most afraid of. "What will you do now?" I asked. She gave a hollow laugh. "What can I do? I'm 5 months pregnant, newly single, and now everyone in Cedar Cove knows I'm the woman who stole her sister's fiancé only to cheat on him with a coworker." She met my eyes directly. "But you've made sure I won't even have Willowbrook or Pearl Bay for the wedding that's not happening anymore, right?" I thought about the renovation plans sitting on my desk at home, the share purchase I'd just canceled, all the elaborate steps in my revenge plan that now seemed pointless. "Actually," I began, but was interrupted by my mother's arrival at our table. "Madison, sweetheart, your father and I think you should come home with us tonight," she said, deliberately ignoring my presence. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I'm fine, Mom," Madison said, sounding exhausted. "Nonsense, you're in shock. And thinking of the baby." "The baby is fine," Madison cut her off. "And I need to talk to Olivia." My mother blinked in surprise. "Now? After everything that's happened? Madison, you need rest, not more stress." "Mom," I stood up. "Give us a few minutes, please." She looked between us, clearly torn between her protective instincts toward Madison and her surprise at our apparent truce. Finally, she nodded stiffly. 5 minutes. Then we're taking you home, Madison." When she was out of earshot, Madison sighed. Some things never change. Still treating me like I'll break and you like you're made of steel. It was an observation so accurate it caught me off guard. Our entire lives, Madison had been the fragile one, the sister who needed protecting, while I was expected to be strong, capable, understanding. "Why did you invite me tonight?" I asked. The real reason. Madison picked at the beading on her dress. I wanted to apologize. Properly. Not just the desperate sorries I've been throwing at you for months. She looked up. And I wanted to tell you about Jason myself before someone else did. I never expected Ryan to announce it to everyone. Would you have actually told me the truth? I don't know, she admitted. I'd like to think so, but... She gestured helplessly. Look at my track record. We sat in silence for a moment. The weight of months of anger and hurt still between us, but different now, shifting. I bought Willowbrook for revenge, I said suddenly. And I was trying to interfere with your booking here too. I wanted to hurt you both the way you hurt me. Madison's laugh held no humor. Well, mission accomplished, though Ryan did most of the work for you in the end. I shook my head. That's just it. Seeing you like this, knowing Ryan was going through his own private hell, it doesn't feel like victory, it just feels sad. So what now? Madison asked. We all just go our separate ways? You with your venues and your revenge, me with my baby and my ruined reputation, Ryan with whatever's left of his life. Put that way, it did sound bleak. Empty. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought past this point. My phone buzzed again, a text from Nathan. How's it going? Need backup? I typed back quickly. It's complicated. Talk tomorrow. They're waiting for me. Madison nodded toward our parents, who were hovering by the door, watching us with concerned expressions. Mom and Dad, ever the protectors of poor, fragile Madison. You're not fragile, I said. You never were. That was just the role you played because it worked. She looked surprised, then thoughtful. Maybe. And you played the strong one because that's what everyone expected. We make quite a pair. We used to. Madison stood up, straightening, her dress with a composure I had to admire, given the circumstances. Good night, Olivia. I watched her walk away, my once closest friend, my only sister, now essentially a stranger. And for the first time in months, the anger that had been driving me forward felt hollow, a poor substitute for the connection we'd once shared. 2 weeks after the disastrous rehearsal dinner, I stood on the grounds of Willowbrook, watching as workers dismantled the scaffold around the newly restored East Wing. The renovation was nearly complete, transforming the historic estate into an even more beautiful version of itself. It looks amazing, Nathan said, joining me on the lawn. You've done a great job with this place. Thanks. I surveyed the property, feeling a complicated pride. I'd bought Willowbrook out of spite, but somewhere along the way, I'd developed a genuine attachment to the estate and its renewal. Have you decided what you're going to do with it? Nathan asked. I'm still thinking, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. An idea had been forming in my mind over the past 2 weeks, something unexpected but increasingly compelling. You're going to sell it, right? Take the profit and move on? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Chloe. Hey, I answered. What's up? I just saw Madison, she said without preamble. At the Lighthouse Cafe. My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to my sister since the night of the rehearsal dinner. And? She looks different. She's cut her hair short, and she was meeting with Jason. I processed this information, trying to ignore the twist of complicated emotions it provoked. They're together now? I don't think so. It looked more like a serious discussion than a romantic meeting. She had a lot of papers with her. Chloe paused, She asked about you. What did she want to know? If you were okay, if you were still angry. I looked around at Willowbrook, my revenge project that had somehow transformed into something else. What did you tell her? I told her she should ask you herself, Chloe said. She's still at the cafe if you want to catch her. After hanging up, I turned to Nathan. I need to go into town. Can you handle the contractor meeting? He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Go. I've got this. The Lighthouse Cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. I spotted Madison immediately, sitting alone by the window, a stack of papers in front of her. She'd indeed cut her hair. The long waves she'd always been so proud of were gone, replaced by a sleek bob that framed her face in a way that made her look older, more serious. She looked up as I approached, surprise flickering across her features. Olivia, mind if I join you? I gestured to the empty chair across from her. She hesitated, then nodded. I was just finishing up. I sat down, noting the papers she was gathering, legal documents of some kind. Chloe said she saw you here. And she told you I was asking about you, Madison finished, a hint of the old sharpness in her tone. Some things never change in a small town. How are you? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. Madison finished organizing her papers before answering. I'm adjusting. Ryan's moved out. He's staying with his brother in Seattle for now. And the baby? Her hand went to her stomach, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. Healthy, active, keeps me up at night already. And Jason? Not in the picture. Romantically, she said, surprising me with her directness. We're figuring out co-parenting arrangements. That's what these are. She tapped the stack of papers. We're trying to get everything legally sorted before the baby comes. I nodded, impressed despite myself by her practical approach. That's mature. A small, sad smile touched her lips. I'm trying something new. The waiter arrived to take my order. I asked for coffee, suddenly aware that I hadn't planned. What to say beyond this point? Madison broke the silence first. I heard you're fixing up Willowbrook. Yes, I confirmed. The renovations are almost done. Are you going to sell it? There was no accusation in her tone, just curiosity. I've been thinking about that, I said slowly, and I've decided not to. She looked surprised. You're keeping it? As what? An investment property? No. I took a deep breath. I'm turning it into a nonprofit event space for community use. Wedding venue operations will continue, but a percentage of the profits will go to scholarships for Cedar Cove students. Madison stared at me. That's not what I expected. Me neither, I admitted, but it feels right. When did you decide this? I've been thinking about it since the rehearsal dinner, I said truthfully. Revenge wasn't making me feel better. It was just keeping me stuck. Madison was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her water glass. I've been doing a lot of thinking too, she finally said, about patterns. How I've always taken the easy way out, letting people, especially you, clean up my messes. It was such an unexpected admission that I didn't know how to respond. I was jealous of you, she continued. Always have been. You were the smart one, the responsible one, the one with the perfect life plan. I wanted what you had, and instead of working for it myself, I just took it. Her voice caught. And I ruined everything for both of us. The waiter brought my coffee, creating a momentary reprieve from the intensity of her confession. When he left, I took a careful sip, buying time to process her words. I was jealous of you too, I finally said. Madison looked up in surprise. Of me? Why? Because everything came easily to you. People naturally loved you, protected you. I had to work for everything: respect, attention, love. She shook her head. That wasn't real love, Olivia. That was, I don't know, some kind of protective instinct people had because I seemed vulnerable. It wasn't based on who I really was. And who are you really? I asked, genuinely curious. Madison touched her newly short hair self-consciously. I'm still figuring that out. But I know who I don't want to be anymore. The person who hurts others to get what she wants. We sat in silence for a moment, each absorbing the other's words. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the complicated truth that lay beneath our estrangement. What about Pearl Bay? Madison asked suddenly. The shares you were trying to buy to disrupt our wedding? Chloe told me about that too. I felt a flush of embarrassment. I canceled that purchase the night of the rehearsal dinner. It seemed pointless after. Everything. She nodded slowly. That would have been the third venue you took from us. Third time's the charm, I said, attempting a weak joke. To my surprise, Madison smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Remember when we were kids and we planned our double wedding? You were going to marry the prince, and I was going to marry his best knight. The memory surfaced unexpectedly, bringing with it a wave of nostalgia for the closeness we'd once shared. You insisted your dress had to be pink, even though Mom told you wedding dresses are traditionally white. And you said you'd wear blue to match the prince's eyes. Madison laughed softly. We had it all figured out. We were 8, I reminded her. And we still thought we'd be best friends forever, she said, her laughter fading. What happened to us, Liv? The childhood nickname hit me harder than I expected. No one had called me Liv since the day I'd found Madison and Ryan together. We grew up, I said simply. We became different people. Did we? Or did we just fall into the roles we thought we were supposed to play? The responsible sister and the reckless one? It was a surprisingly insightful question. Maybe a bit of both. Madison glanced at her watch and began gathering her papers. I have a doctor's appointment. I should go. I nodded, feeling strangely reluctant to end the conversation. Madison, I said as she stood up. The nonprofit at Willowbrook. One of the things I'm planning is a gallery space for local artists. If you're interested in being involved. Her eyes widened slightly. You'd want me to be involved? After everything? It's your expertise, I said, keeping my tone professional. And it would be good for the community. Madison studied me for a long moment. I'd have to think about it. Of course, I said quickly. It was just an idea. She nodded, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. Thank you for the offer, Olivia, and for for talking to me. I watched her leave, feeling like something important had just happened, though I couldn't quite define what. That evening, I met Nathan at our usual spot in Harborview Park, overlooking the water. The sunset painted the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks, reflecting off the calm surface of the bay. How did it go with Madison? He asked as we walked along the shoreline. Strange, I admitted, but not bad. We actually had a real conversation for the first time in months. About Ryan? Not really. More about us, our patterns. I picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. Did you know I was jealous of her growing up? Nathan considered this. I guess I never thought about it that way. You always seemed so together, like you had everything figured out. That was the act, I said. Madison played the fragile one, and I played the strong one. We both got trapped in those roles until we couldn't see each other as actual people anymore. And now? I shrugged. Now we're trying to figure out who we really are, I guess. Without the act. Nathan stopped walking, turning to face me directly. And who are you, Olivia? Without the revenge plan, without the anger driving you forward, Who do you want to be? It was the question I'd been asking myself for the past 2 weeks, ever since the night of the rehearsal dinner when all my carefully laid plans had suddenly seemed hollow. I want to be someone who builds things, I said slowly, not someone who tears them down. That's why I'm keeping Willowbrook, turning it into something positive. Is that enough? Nathan asked gently. To move forward? I thought about Madison's newly cut hair, her straightforward approach to co-parenting with Jason, the glimmer of the sister I'd once loved that I'd seen today at the cafe. No, I admitted. But it's a start. 3 months later, I stood in the grand ballroom of Willowbrook Estate, watching as the final preparations were made for the opening gala of the Willowbrook Community Arts and Events Center. The renovations were complete, transforming the historic mansion into a beautiful multi-purpose space while preserving its original character. The East Wing now housed a small but elegant art gallery, curated, surprisingly to some, by Madison, whose expertise in the local art scene had proven invaluable. Our professional relationship had been tentative at first, each of us carefully maintaining boundaries, but over time it had evolved into something that, while not the easy closeness of our childhood, was its own kind of connection. Everything looks perfect, Chloe said, joining me by the grand staircase. You've done an amazing job with this place. We all have, I corrected her, gesturing to where Nathan was directing the catering staff, his organizational skills proving as useful here as they had been in my revenge planning. It's been a group effort. Speaking of groups, Chloe nodded toward the entrance. Your parents just arrived. I took a deep breath. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. They'd been skeptical of the Willowbrook project at first, viewing it as another elaborate scheme on my part. It had taken time, and Madison's surprising support, to convince them that my intentions were genuine. Olivia, my mother approached, looking elegant but slightly uncomfortable. The place looks lovely. Thank you, I said, accepting her air kiss. I'm glad you could make it. My father stood awkwardly beside her. Impressive work, he managed, looking around the ballroom. Very community-minded. It wasn't exactly a warm endorsement, but it was progress. Madison's in the gallery if you want to see her, I told them. She's been working all day to get the exhibition ready. They nodded and moved off in that direction, leaving me with mixed feelings. Our family dynamic was still finding its new balance, the old patterns of expectation and resentment slowly being renegotiated. As guests began to arrive, community leaders, local business owners, supporters of the arts, I found myself drawn to the gallery wing. I paused in the doorway, watching as Madison guided our parents through the exhibition she'd curated. Her pregnancy was now in its final weeks, her belly pronounced beneath the flowing dress she wore. She looked up and saw me watching, a moment of understanding passing between us. She excused herself from our parents and made her way over to me. Nervous? She asked, joining me in the doorway. A little, I admitted. You? Terrified. She smiled, then glanced back at the gallery. But proud, too. This is good work, Olivia. Not just the renovation, but what you're doing with it. Your exhibition is the highlight, I said, meaning it. You've brought together some incredible artists. Madison placed a hand on her stomach as the baby kicked. Olivia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. What is it? She hesitated, uncharacteristically tentative. When the baby comes. Would you be there? Not in the room, she added quickly. Just nearby. It would mean a lot to have family there. Family. The word hung between us, weighted with history and possibility. Are you sure? I asked, carefully. Madison nodded. I'm sure. We're not who we were, either of us, but we're still sisters. Before I could respond, Nathan appeared, looking slightly frantic. Olivia, the mayor's here early, and the caterer has a question about the champagne service. Go, Madison said with a small smile. It's your big night. We can talk later. As I moved through the gathering crowd, fielding questions and accepting congratulations, I found myself thinking about Madison's words. We're not who we were, either of us, but we're still sisters. The revenge that had consumed me for months had ultimately led me somewhere unexpected, not to the destruction I'd planned, but to a kind of rebirth. For Willowbrook, for Madison, for myself. Later that evening, as the gala was in full swing, I stepped outside onto the rose terrace for a moment of quiet. The gardens were illuminated with soft lighting, the restored pathways winding through carefully tended flower beds. In the distance, I could see Cedar Cove's lights reflecting on the water of the bay. Nathan found me there, 2 glasses of champagne, in hand. Hiding from your success? I accepted one of the glasses with a smile, just taking a moment to breathe. To Willowbrook, he raised his glass. And to new beginnings. New beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As we stood there in comfortable silence, I realized that the hollow feeling that had driven me for so long had been replaced by something else. Not happiness exactly, at least not yet, but possibility. The possibility of building something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. The possibility of finding my way forward without the weight of anger and betrayal holding me back. Inside, I could see Madison through the windows, talking animatedly with a group of artists, one hand resting on her belly. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and she gave me a small nod, acknowledgement of how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. I nodded back, accepting the complicated truth of our shared past and the uncertain promise of our future. Some wounds may never fully heal, but perhaps they could become part of a new story, one that we were both, in our own ways, just beginning to write. 6 weeks after the gala, I found myself pacing the waiting room of Cedar Cove Memorial Hospital, checking my watch every few minutes. Madison had gone into labor early that morning, 3 weeks before her due date. Nathan sat nearby, flipping through a dog-eared magazine without really reading it. "She's going to be fine," he said, noticing my agitation. "First babies often take their time." I nodded, trying to calm my nerves. When Madison had called me at 5 a.m., her voice tight with pain and something close to fear, I hadn't hesitated. I'd promised to be there, and I was keeping that promise, even if it meant spending hours in this sterile waiting room with its too bright lighting and faint antiseptic smell. My parents had arrived shortly after us, their faces drawn with worry. My mother had immediately gone to Madison's room, while my father took up residence in a corner chair, methodically working his way through a stack of hospital paperwork Madison had left uncompleted. We acknowledged each other with cautious nods but little conversation. Some wounds were still too fresh for casual chat. "Any news?" Chloe hurried in, carrying a pink gift bag and a tray of coffee cups. She'd been out of town at a conference, but had driven back immediately when I texted about Madison. "Nothing yet." I accepted a coffee gratefully. "She's been in active labor for about 4 hours now." "And Jason?" Chloe asked, glancing around the waiting room. "He's with her. Arrived right after we did." To everyone's surprise, Jason had stepped up in the months following the rehearsal dinner revelation. He wasn't in a romantic relationship with Madison, but he'd made it clear he intended to be present for his child. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Doctor says it's going well, but still some time to go. Madison asking for you." I stared at the screen, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. Despite our tentative reconciliation over the past months, I hadn't expected Madison to want me near during such a vulnerable moment. "Everything okay?" Nathan asked, noting my expression. "Madison's asking for me," I said, still processing. "I should go." The maternity ward was quieter than I expected. the soft beeping of monitors and hushed voices of nurses creating a strangely peaceful atmosphere. I found my mother outside Madison's room, her face lined with fatigue but calm. "She's between contractions right now," she said, squeezing my arm. "The doctor says everything looks good, just slow progress." I nodded, suddenly hesitant. "Are you sure she wants me in there?" My mother's expression softened slightly. "She asked for you specifically, Olivia. 3 times." Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The room was dimly lit, with monitors casting a bluish glow over the bed where Madison lay. Jason sat beside her, holding her hand, while a nurse checked various readings on one of the machines. Madison looked up as I entered, her face pale and sheened with sweat, her short hair pushed back with a headband. "You came?" she said, her voice hoarse. "Of course I did." I moved to the other side of the bed, awkwardly patting her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" She gave a weak laugh. "Like I'm being torn in half. But apparently that's normal." Jason nodded to me, his expression a mix of anxiety and determination. "The doctor says we've still got a ways to go." Before I could respond, Madison's face contorted in pain, her grip tightening on Jason's hand as another contraction began. I started to back away, feeling intrusive, but Madison reached out blindly and grabbed my wrist. "Stay," she gasped between controlled breaths. "Please." I stayed. Hours passed in that strange, timeless way that only happens in hospital rooms and airport terminals. I found myself falling into an unexpected role: advocate, supporter, occasional translator between Madison and the medical staff. When pain made her communication less than clear, Jason remained steadfast, but was clearly overwhelmed by the intensity of the labor process. My mother came and went, coordinating with the rest of the family in the waiting room. It was nearly midnight when the atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. The doctor was called in, more nurses appeared, and Madison's pain took on a different quality. "It's time to push," the doctor announced, positioning herself at the foot of the bed. "On the next contraction, Madison, I need you to bear down with everything you have." What followed was both the most primal and most miraculous thing I'd ever witnessed. Madison, my spoiled, dramatic sister, revealed a strength I never would have believed her capable of. Through pain that made her scream and moments of near defeat when she sobbed that she couldn't continue, she fought to bring her baby into the world. And bizarrely, impossibly, I found myself completely in sync with her, counting through contractions, wiping her forehead, advocating with the nurses when she needed a moment to rest. Somewhere in those intense hours, the complicated history between us receded, leaving only 2 women working together toward something larger than both of us. "One more push," the doctor urged as Madison groaned with exhaustion. "I can see the head. One more big push." Madison's eyes found mine, filled with fear and determination. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can," I said firmly, gripping her hand. "You've always been stronger than anyone gave you credit for, including yourself. One more push, Maddie. You can do this." The childhood nickname slipped out without thought. Maddie, what I'd called her before we were old enough for rivalry or resentment. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with renewed purpose. With a primal cry that seemed to come from somewhere beyond conscious thought, Madison gave a final, mighty push. And suddenly, impossibly, a new life entered the room. Tiny, red-faced, and announcing her arrival with a lusty wail that belied her small size. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, unnecessarily as she placed the squirming infant on Madison's chest. "A beautiful baby girl." I stepped back, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this intensely intimate moment as Madison and Jason marveled over their daughter. The medical team moved efficiently around them, completing necessary procedures while giving the new parents their moment of wonder. "Olivia," Madison's voice pulled me back from my retreat. Her face was transformed by a mixture of exhaustion and radiant joy as she cradled her daughter. "Come meet your niece." I moved closer, peering down at the tiny face still scrunched with the indignity of birth. A powerful rush of emotion caught me off guard. Protectiveness, wonder, and a fierce, unexpected love for this small new person who knew nothing of our complicated past. "She's perfect," I whispered, meaning it. Madison's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for being here. I couldn't have done this without you." We both knew she could have. Madison had revealed a strength neither of us had fully recognized before, but I understood what she meant. Something had happened in that delivery room, something neither of us had planned or expected. A healing had begun. "What's her name?" I asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand, marveling as miniature fingers curled reflexively around mine. Madison and Jason exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've been discussing that," Madison said carefully. "And we were thinking, Olivia Grace." The world seemed to stop for a moment as I processed her words. "You want to name her after me?" "Only if you're okay with it," Madison added quickly. "I know before, at the family dinner, you said—" "That was different," I interrupted, remembering my angry words months ago when Madison had suggested naming the baby after me as some kind of peace offering. "That was about guilt and manipulation. This is because you're her aunt," Jason finished simply. "And because when Madison needed someone today, you were there. No questions asked." I looked at the baby, at little Olivia, and felt the last hard edges of my anger begin to dissolve. Not forgotten, not erased, but transformed into something else, something that left room for a future beyond the pain of the past. "I'd be honored," I said softly. In the early morning light, I stood by the window of Madison's hospital room, cradling my niece while her exhausted parents caught a few minutes of much-needed sleep. The baby was impossibly light in my arms, her tiny face peaceful in slumber. "You've had quite the dramatic entrance," I whispered to her, rocking gently. "But then, drama runs in the family." My reflection in the window glass caught my attention. The dark circles under my eyes, the disheveled hair, the soft smile I hardly recognized on my own face. The woman who had meticulously planned her revenge, who had bought Willowbrook Estate to punish her sister, seemed very far away from this moment. A soft knock at the door preceded my father's cautious entrance. He paused when he saw me holding the baby, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "Your mother said I could come in," he said softly, mindful of the sleeping parents. "How is everyone?" "Exhausted but good," I replied, equally quiet. "Do you want to meet your granddaughter?" He approached with uncharacteristic hesitation, peering down at the bundle in my arms. His expression softened instantly, the stern lines of his face melting away. "She's beautiful," he breathed. "May I?" I carefully transferred the baby to his arms, watching as he cradled her with a tenderness I hadn't seen since Madison and I were small. For a moment, we stood together in comfortable silence, both mesmerized by the newest member of our family. "Olivia," my father finally said, not looking up from the baby, "I owe you an apology." The words were so unexpected that I couldn't immediately respond. "When everything happened with Madison and Ryan," he continued, "your mother and we didn't handle it well. We were so focused on protecting Madison that we didn't see how much you were hurting." "Dad, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "We've always expected you to be the strong one, the one who could handle anything. It wasn't fair to you then, and it isn't fair to you now." He finally looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm sorry." The simple words unlocked something in my chest that I hadn't even realized was still locked away. Not all the hurt, not all the resentment, but enough that I could take a full breath for what felt like the first time in months. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded, then turned his attention back to his granddaughter. "Madison told us about the name. It's a good choice. You think so?" "I do." He smiled down at the baby. Little Olivia Grace, named after her strong, resilient aunt who knows how to forgive. I didn't correct his assumption about forgiveness. The truth was more complicated. Not complete forgiveness, perhaps, but a willingness to move beyond the past that had felt impossible just months ago. "She'll need both of her aunts," Madison's voice came softly from the bed. She'd awakened and was watching us with tired eyes. The strong one and the creative one. My father carried the baby back to her mother, placing her gently in Madison's arms before discreetly slipping from the room, leaving us alone. "I thought we were trying to move past those labels," I said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "The strong sister and the fragile one." Madison adjusted the blanket around her daughter. "Not labels, just different strengths. You taught me that, actually. At Willowbrook, watching you transform that place, strength isn't just about enduring. It's about building something new from what's broken." It was perhaps the most insightful thing I'd ever heard my sister say, and it caught me off guard. "When did you get so wise?" She smiled down at her daughter. "Somewhere between losing everything I thought I wanted and finding what I actually needed." She looked up at me. "I don't expect us to ever go back to how we were before. Too much has happened, but I'd like us to find a way forward, for her sake, if nothing else." "I'd like that too," I said, surprised to find I meant it. 2 months later, I found myself once again at the Lighthouse Cafe, this time with Nathan, Chloe, and a stack of applications for the first round of Willowbrook scholarships. The nonprofit was thriving beyond my expectations, with community events booked months in advance and the gallery gaining recognition throughout the Pacific Northwest. 12 applicants for 2 scholarships, Chloe said, reviewing the files. "That's impressive for the first year." "And all of them qualified," Nathan added. "You've got some tough decisions ahead." I sipped my coffee, enjoying the familiar comfort of our regular table by the window. Outside, Cedar Cove was enjoying the first truly warm day of spring, the harbor filled with boats and the sidewalks busy with tourists and locals alike. "Actually," I said, setting down my cup, "I've been thinking about expanding the program. If we allocate some of the wedding venue profits, we could potentially fund 2 more scholarships this year." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. Are you sure the finances can handle it?" Before I could answer, the cafe door opened and Madison entered, pushing a stroller. She spotted us immediately and made her way to our table, navigating between chairs with the expertise of a new mother who'd already mastered the art of stroller management in public spaces. "Sorry I'm late," she said, parking the stroller beside the table. Someone decided it was a good day for a diaper emergency. I peered into the stroller at my sleeping niece, now a chubby-cheeked 2-month-old with a surprising amount of dark hair. She looks innocent enough. "Don't be fooled," Madison laughed, settling into the empty chair we'd saved for her. "She's developing quite the personality." The ease with which Madison had joined our regular scholarship committee meeting still felt slightly surreal. When I'd first suggested she might want to be involved with the Willowbrook Foundation, I'd expected polite refusal. Instead, she'd embraced the idea with enthusiasm, particularly the arts education component that aligned with her gallery experience. "We were just discussing expanding the scholarship program," Chloe filled her in, sliding a copy of the financial projections across the table. "Olivia thinks we can fund 2 additional students this year." Madison studied the numbers with a focus that would have surprised anyone who still thought of her as the flighty younger sister. Motherhood had accelerated the changes that had begun after the rehearsal dinner disaster, revealing a practical, determined side of Madison that had previously been hidden beneath layers of drama and performance. "What if we partner with the Cedar Cove Arts Council?" she suggested, looking up. "They've been looking for education initiatives to support. If they matched even a portion of the funding, we could potentially double the impact." "That's actually brilliant," I admitted, impressed. "Do you have contacts there who might be receptive?" "Several," Madison nodded, "including their new director, who happens to owe me a favor after I helped curate their winter exhibition." Nathan looked between us with an expression of amused disbelief. "You two working together is still the strangest plot twist of this whole saga." Madison and I exchanged a glance, acknowledging the truth in his observation. Our relationship remained a work in progress, marked by occasional awkward silences and careful navigation around certain topics. But it had evolved into something neither of us could have imagined in the dark days after Ryan's betrayal had come to light. "Speaking of plot twists," Chloe said, checking her phone, "I heard Ryan's back in town." The table fell silent. Ryan's name was one of those topics we typically avoided, an unspoken agreement that had developed naturally over the past months. "For good?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Chloe shrugged. "Not sure. I just saw him at the hardware store yesterday. He looked different. Beard, longer hair." I glanced at Madison, who was fussing unnecessarily with the baby's blanket. "I knew he was back," she said without looking up. "He contacted Jason about meeting the baby. How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Madison sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "Complicated. He's not her father, but for a while we all thought he was going to be. And despite everything, I don't hate him, Olivia. I'm not sure I even have the right to." "You have every right to your feelings," I said automatically, then realized how therapist-like I sounded. "Sorry, I just mean, it's okay if it's complicated." "Everything's complicated," she said with a small smile. "That seems to be our family specialty." Nathan cleared his throat. "Should we get back to the scholarship applications? We've got some decisions to make before the deadline next week." We returned to the work at hand, but the mention of Ryan lingered in my mind. I hadn't allowed myself to think about him much in recent months, focusing instead on Willowbrook and the gradual reconstruction of my relationship with Madison. But the news of his return stirred something unexpected. Not the sharp pain I'd anticipated, but curiosity, and perhaps a certain readiness to face that chapter of my past with the perspective distance had provided. Later that afternoon, as I walked along the harbor path toward my apartment, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench overlooking the water. Even with the beard and longer hair Chloe had mentioned, I recognized Ryan immediately. For a moment, I considered turning around, avoiding what would inevitably be an awkward encounter. But something stopped me. Perhaps the same instinct that had led me to Madison's hospital room, or to the decision to transform Willowbrook into something meaningful rather than a monument to revenge. "Hello, Ryan," I said, approaching the bench. He looked up, startled, then stood quickly. "Olivia, I didn't expect to see you here." "I live nearby," I said, gesturing vaguely toward my apartment building. "Chloe mentioned she saw you yesterday. Are you back in Cedar Cove for good?" "No." He shook his head. "Just for a few weeks. I'm helping my brother with some renovation work on his house, and..." He hesitated. "I wanted to meet Madison's baby." I nodded, studying him. Chloe was right. He looked different, and not just because of the beard. There was something more settled about him, less of the restless energy that had always characterized him. "I heard about what you did with Willowbrook," he said after a moment. "The nonprofit, the scholarships, it's impressive." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the genuine note in his voice. "It's been healing, I suppose. Taking something that began with such negative intentions and making it into something positive." Ryan nodded, looking out over the harbor. I've been trying to do something similar with my life, on a smaller scale. Rebuilding, making amends where I can. Is that why you want to meet the baby? Partly, he admitted, but also because, for a while there, I thought she was going to be my daughter. I know she's not, but I still feel connected somehow. Is that strange? A little, I said honestly, but I understand it. Life doesn't always follow the clean narrative lines we'd prefer. He smiled slightly at that. No, it certainly doesn't. He turned to face me directly. I owe you an apology, Olivia. A real one, not the mess of excuses and self-pity I offered before. What I did, what Madison and I did, was inexcusable. I hurt you in the worst possible way, and no explanation or justification changes that. I'd imagined this moment so many times. During those first dark months after the betrayal, Ryan apologizing, begging for forgiveness, me coldly rejecting him. The reality was both simpler and more complex. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It matters, even now. I don't expect forgiveness, he clarified. I just wanted you to know that I understand the magnitude of what I did, and I regret it every day. We stood in silence for a moment, the harbor breeze ruffling my hair. Finally, I asked the question that had lingered in the back of my mind for months. Are you happy, Ryan? Now, I mean. He considered the question seriously. I'm at peace, I think, working through things, building a life that's more honest than the one I was living before. He looked at me curiously. What about you? Are you happy? 6 months ago, I couldn't have answered that question. Consumed by anger and plans for revenge, happiness hadn't even been on my radar. But now, thinking about Willowbrook, about my tentative new relationship with Madison, about little Olivia Grace and the unexpected joy she'd brought into my life, I found I could answer honestly. I'm getting there, I said. One day at a time. Ryan nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's all any of us can do, I suppose. As I continued my walk home after saying goodbye to Ryan, I found myself thinking about the strange, unpredictable path that had led me to this moment. From devastation to revenge to something approaching healing, none of it had followed the script I would have written for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Baby Olivia requests the pleasure of her aunt's company for dinner tonight. Jason's cooking, so at least the food will be edible. I smiled, typing back a quick acceptance. The mention of Jason reminded me of yet another unexpected turn in this winding story. After months of co-parenting negotiations and tentative friendship, Madison and Jason had begun cautiously exploring a romantic relationship, one built on honesty and shared purpose rather than drama and secrecy. As I reached my apartment building, I paused to look back at the harbor, at the town that had been the setting for both the worst and most transformative chapters of my life. Cedar Cove hadn't changed, but my place within it had, shifting from the woman who had been publicly betrayed to the director of a respected community foundation, from Ryan's ex-fiancé to Olivia in my own right. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear or free of complications. Madison and I were still figuring out our new dynamic as sisters and colleagues. My parents were making efforts to repair the damage done, but sometimes fell back into old patterns. And somewhere in this small town, Ryan was also trying to find his way forward, a reminder of both pain and the possibility of growth. But for the first time since that devastating day when I'd walked in on Ryan and Madison, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not because everything had been resolved or forgiven, but because I'd found strength I didn't know I possessed and built, something meaningful from the ruins of what was lost. My sister had stolen my boyfriend and wedding venue, but what happened after had changed everything. Not just for her, but for all of us. And in that change, painful as it had been, lay the seeds of something unexpectedly beautiful. One year, After little Olivia's birth, I stood on the Willowbrook Estate terrace watching as guests mingled across the immaculately maintained gardens. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting a warm glow over the celebration. The Willowbrook Foundation's first anniversary gala had drawn Cedar Cove's most prominent citizens, along with beneficiaries of our programs and scholarship recipients. "Quite a turnout," Nathan commented, appearing at my side with 2 champagne flutes. He handed me one, his fingers briefly brushing mine. "The mayor just pledged to match donations for the summer arts program." I smiled, taking a sip of champagne. "Did you work your persuasive magic on him?" "Didn't have to. The foundation's reputation speaks for itself." Nathan clinked his glass against mine. "You should be proud, Olivia. This place has become everything you hoped it would be." I surveyed the scene before us, the historic mansion beautifully lit against the darkening sky, the art gallery where Madison had curated an exhibition featuring local artists, the education center that now hosted classes 5 days a week. It was hard to reconcile this Willowbrook with the one I'd purchased in anger, intending it only as an instrument of revenge. "I never imagined this," I admitted quietly. "When I bought Willowbrook, I wasn't thinking about community impact or educational opportunities. I just wanted to hurt Madison and Ryan the way they'd hurt me." Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes our worst moments lead us to our best possibilities." Before I could respond, I spotted Madison making her way through the crowd toward us, little Olivia balanced on her hip. At 12 months, my niece was a curious, energetic toddler with Madison's expressive eyes and a determined personality, all her own. "There's Aunt Olivia," Madison said, pointing in my direction. Little Olivia's face lit up with recognition, her arms reaching toward me. Little Olivia's face lit up with recognition, her arms reaching toward me. "May I?" I asked, setting down my champagne glass. Madison transferred her daughter to my arms. "She's been asking for Vivi all evening." My niece had recently started, attempting my name, condensing it to a more manageable syllable that had quickly become her preferred term for me. "Have you been charming all the donors?" I asked the toddler, who responded by patting my cheek with a chubby hand. "She's a natural." Madison laughed, just like her mother. The easy way Madison referenced her own social skills, once a source of tension between us, reflected how much our relationship had evolved. The competitive undercurrent that had characterized our interactions for years had gradually transformed into a mutual appreciation of our different strengths. "Your exhibition is drawing quite a crowd," I nodded toward the gallery wing, where guests clustered around the displayed artwork. "The scholarship students' pieces especially." Madison beamed with genuine pride. "They're incredibly talented. Amber's sculpture series is already attracting attention from the Seattle arts community." As if summoned by our conversation, Amber, one of our first scholarship recipients, approached, her expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Ms. Wright, Ms. Madison," she addressed us both, clutching a business card. "I just spoke with the director of the Pacific Northwest Arts Collective. He wants to include my work in their Emerging Artists Showcase next month." "Amber, that's wonderful!" Madison exclaimed, giving the young woman a quick hug. "Did I not tell you your work was exceptional?" I shifted little Olivia to my other hip, freeing a hand to congratulate Amber. "This is exactly what the foundation was created to support. Your talent deserves recognition." After Amber returned to the gallery, visibly floating on her success, Madison turned to me with an expression that still occasionally caught me off. Guard, admiration mixed with sisterly affection. "You made this possible," she said quietly. "All of it." "We made it possible," I corrected her, bouncing little Olivia, who was beginning to squirm. "The gallery was your vision." Madison shook her head. "I mean all of it. Willowbrook, the foundation, the scholarships. Even when you were at your angriest, You chose to create something rather than destroy. It was a generous interpretation of my initial motives, but I didn't contradict her. The truth was both darker and more complex. I had wanted destruction. First and only later found my way to creation. But perhaps the journey mattered less than where it had ultimately led. Little Olivia, growing restless with adult conversation, pointed emphatically toward the gardens where other children were playing under the supervision of an event staff member. "Someone wants to join the fun," I observed, setting her down. Madison took her daughter's hand, preparing to lead her to the children's area. "Wait," I said, suddenly remembering. "I have something for her. It's in my office." Madison raised an eyebrow. "Another present? You'll spoil her." "It's her birthday week," I defended myself. "Aunt's privilege." In my office, located in what had once been Willowbrook's library, I retrieved the carefully wrapped package from my desk drawer. It was small, but had taken months to prepare, a custom-illustrated children's book telling the story of Willowbrook in simple, magical terms. The protagonist was a little girl named Olivia who discovered a special garden where dreams could grow. When I returned to the terrace, Madison and Jason were standing together, watching their daughter play with the other children. The sight of them, comfortable now in their partnership, built on shared purpose rather than the deception that had characterized her relationship with Ryan, still occasionally surprised me. They weren't the passionate, dramatic couple Madison had once envisioned for herself, but there was a steadiness between them that seemed to suit the people they'd become. "Is that what I think it is?" Jason asked, noticing the package in my hands. He'd been aware of the book project, having helped supply photographs of Willowbrook for the illustrator's reference. "It's finally finished," I confirmed. "I thought tonight would be a good time to give it to her." We called little Olivia over, and she toddled toward us with the determination of a child recently confident in her walking abilities. I knelt to her level, presenting the package. "Happy birthday, Olivia Grace," I said as she attacked the wrapping paper with enthusiasm. Madison helped her daughter reveal the book, gasping appropriately when she saw the custom cover featuring a watercolor illustration of Willowbrook with a small figure that resembled little Olivia standing before its gates. "Olivia's Garden of Dreams," Madison read the title aloud, "by Olivia Wright." She looked up at me, surprised. "You wrote it?" I nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "The Foundation's publishing program helped with production. The proceeds will fund more children's books by local authors." Jason flipped through the pages, admiringly. "This is incredible, Olivia. The illustrations are beautiful." Little Olivia, more interested in the colorful pictures than the adults. Conversation pointed to the girl on the cover. "Vivi," she declared confidently. "That's you," I explained, pointing to the character. "Olivia in the garden." And look. Madison turned to a page showing two women planting flowers together. "There's your mommy and your Aunt Olivia." The illustration depicted two figures working side by side in the garden, one with short hair like Madison's, the other with my longer style. It had been the illustrator's idea to include this image, but I had approved it, recognizing the symbolic truth it represented. Little Olivia studied the page with serious concentration before breaking into a toothy grin. "Mama, Vivi!" she exclaimed, patting the page with delight. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of my parents, both dressed formally for the gala. Their relationship with me had gradually warmed over the past year, though it still carried echoes of our difficult history. They doted on their granddaughter, however, and had become regular visitors to Willowbrook for family events. "There's our birthday girl," my father said, crouching despite his formal attire to receive little Olivia's enthusiastic hug. "What have you got there?" "Aunt Olivia wrote her a book," Madison explained, showing him the cover. My mother examined it with genuine interest. "You wrote this? I had no idea you were working on something like this." "It was a side project," I said, downplaying the months of early mornings and late nights I'd spent crafting the story. Just something special for Olivia. My father's eyes met mine over the top of his granddaughter's head. It's more than just a book, he said quietly. It's a legacy. The word settled over me, unexpectedly weighty. Legacy. What would mine be? A year ago, I might have defined it in terms of professional achievements. Partnership at Horizon Financial, which I'd finally achieved 6 months earlier, or the growing reputation of the Willowbrook Foundation. But standing there, watching my niece clutch the book I'd created for her, surrounded by family that had been broken and painstakingly mended, I realized legacy was something more complicated and more meaningful than professional milestones. The evening continued. Speeches were made, donations announced, accomplishments celebrated. I moved through it all with practiced ease, the role of executive director now fitting comfortably after a year of growth and challenges. Yet throughout the festivities, my father's word echoed in my thoughts. Legacy. It was nearly midnight when the last guests departed. Madison and Jason had left earlier, taking an exhausted little Olivia home to bed. My parents had stayed until the end, helping to see off important donors and community partners. As the catering staff began the cleanup process, I found myself back on the terrace, gazing out at the moonlit gardens. "Penny, for your thoughts," my mother's voice came from behind me. She joined me at the railing, her elegant evening wear at odds with the tired lines around her eyes. "Just reflecting," I said. "It's been quite a year." She nodded, following my gaze out to the grounds. "Your father and I are very proud of what you've accomplished here, Olivia. Though I know we haven't always been good at expressing that." The acknowledgement, simple as it was, eased something within me. "Thank you. That means a lot." "When everything happened with Madison and Ryan," she began carefully, "we handled it poorly. We fell back into old patterns, protecting Madison, expecting you to be strong enough to handle yourself. You don't have to—" "Please," she interrupted gently. "Let me say this. We were wrong, and our actions caused you additional pain during an already difficult time. I'm sorry for that." I studied my mother's face, noting the sincerity in her expression. We'd had versions of this conversation over the past year, each time adding another layer of understanding, another step toward healing the fractures in our relationship. "I wasn't as strong as you thought," I admitted. "When I bought Willowbrook, it wasn't from a place of strength. It was from anger, hurt, a desire to make Madison and Ryan suffer. But look what you created from that beginning," my mother gestured to the estate around us. "Sometimes our most difficult moments reveal capacities we didn't know we possessed." It was similar to what Nathan had said earlier, this idea that darkness could somehow lead to light, that destruction could be the first step toward creation. I wasn't entirely convinced. The pain I'd experienced, the pain I'd been willing to inflict in return, couldn't be neatly repackaged as necessary steps on a journey toward growth. And yet, standing here at Willowbrook, it was impossible to deny that something beautiful had emerged from that difficult beginning. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, the question forming as I spoke, "what would have happened if I hadn't walked in on them that day? If the wedding had gone forward as planned?" My mother considered this, her gaze distant. "I think about it sometimes. You would have married Ryan, never knowing about Madison's feelings for him or his for her. You might have been happy, at least for a while. Or perhaps the truth would have emerged later, in even more painful circumstances. And Olivia wouldn't exist," I added softly, thinking of my niece's bright eyes and determined spirit. "At least not as she is now." "That's the strange thing about life's worst moments," my mother said. "They close certain doors but open others. We couldn't have imagined. The question is whether we have the courage to walk through those new doors." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of shared history between us. Finally, my mother squeezed my arm gently. "Your father's waiting in the car. Will you be all right locking up? I nodded. Nathan's still here. We'll make sure everything's secure before leaving. After my parents departed, I found Nathan in the main hall, reviewing the event checklist with the head of the catering team. He looked up as I approached, a question in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked once the caterer had moved away. "Yes," I said and meant it, just having a moment of reflection with my mother. "Ah, deep thoughts under the moonlight," he teased gently. "Care to share?" I considered deflecting with a light comment, but the events of the evening, the gala's success, the book for Olivia, my conversation with my mother, had created a mood of unusual openness. "I was thinking about legacies," I said. "About how the worst chapter of my life somehow led to all of this." I gestured around us at Willowbrook, and wondering what that means, if anything. Nathan studied me thoughtfully. "Maybe it means you're more resilient than you knew. Or maybe it means pain doesn't have to define us. It's what we build afterward that matters. Or maybe it's simpler than that," I suggested. "Maybe it just means life is messy and complicated, and sometimes good things come from bad situations without any grand meaning attached." He smiled. "That's very pragmatic of you, Olivia, right?" "I am a pragmatist," I reminded him. "At least, most of the time." "And the rest of the time?" he asked, his tone shifting subtly. I thought about the children's book I'd written for my niece, about the scholarship program I'd expanded beyond practical financial constraints, because I believed in its importance, about the way I'd begun to reconnect with Madison despite all logical reasons to maintain my distance. "The rest of the time," I admitted. "I might be something of an idealist after all." Nathan's smile deepened. "I've always suspected as much." The moment between us lengthened, charged with something that had been building gradually over the past year. Our friendship had deepened during the creation of the Willowbrook Foundation, evolving into a partnership that blurred professional and personal boundaries. We'd never discussed it directly, maintaining a careful balance that preserved both our working relationship and the friendship that had supported me through the darkest period of my life. But tonight, standing in the quieted great hall of Willowbrook, the balance seemed to shift. "Nathan," I began, uncertain what I wanted to say, but feeling the need to acknowledge the moment. "I know," he said quietly. "Me too." The simplicity of his response made me smile. "That's presumptuous. You don't know what I was going to say." "Fair point," he conceded. "What were you going to say?" I considered various approaches, careful, measured, rational, before deciding on honesty. That I'm not the same person I was a year ago, that I'm still figuring out who this new version of me is and what she wants. But that I think, perhaps, she might be ready to explore possibilities I wasn't ready for before. Nathan nodded slowly. "That's actually much more eloquent than what I thought you were going to say." "And what did you think I was going to say?" "And what did you think I was going to say?" "Something along the lines of, 'This is probably a terrible idea, but I think we should consider dating,'" he admitted with a grin. I laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. "That does sound like me." "For the record," he said, his expression growing more serious, "I've been waiting for you to be ready. I would have waited longer if necessary." The quiet certainty in his voice touched me deeply. Through all the chaos and pain of the past year, Nathan had been a constant presence, supportive without being intrusive, caring without demanding reciprocation. "I think," I said carefully, "that I'd like to have dinner with you. Not a work dinner or a friends catching up dinner, but an actual date." His smile was worth the momentary vulnerability. "I'd like that very much." As we finished securing Willowbrook for the night, walking through the quiet rooms to check windows and doors, I found myself thinking again about unexpected paths and unplanned destinations. When I'd first learned of Madison and Ryan's betrayal, I couldn't have imagined standing here a year later. successful professionally, healing personally, and open to new possibilities romantically. Life didn't follow neat narrative arcs or deliver perfect justice. Madison and Ryan hadn't been punished in the way my initial anger had demanded. Instead, life had delivered its own complex consequences. Madison finding her way to a more honest relationship with Jason, Ryan facing his own demons and beginning his own journey toward redemption, and me discovering strengths and capacities I hadn't known I possessed. The next morning, I arrived at Willowbrook early, drawn by the peaceful quiet of the estate before the day's activities began. The gardeners had already started their work, preparing for the children's program that would occupy the grounds later that morning. I walked through the rose garden, now in full summer bloom, remembering how this had been the setting for Madison and Ryan's announcement photo so long ago. It no longer hurt to think of that time. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed, becoming part of my history rather than an active wound requiring constant attention. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Jason says to remind you about dinner tonight. He's making his famous risotto." I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. These family dinners had become a regular occurrence, sometimes at Madison and Jason's place, sometimes at my apartment, occasionally at our parents' home when they were in town. They weren't always comfortable or easy, but they were genuine, the forced politeness of the early gatherings gradually giving way to a new kind of honesty between us all. As I continued my walk toward the small lake at the far end of the property, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on the dock, Ryan. In the year since our chance meeting by the harbor, he had returned to Cedar Cove permanently, taking a position with a local architectural firm. His relationship with our extended circle remained complicated, but had settled into something resembling friendly distance. He occasionally visited little Olivia, a relationship Madison and Jason had cautiously supported given his brief but significant role in the pregnancy. "Morning," I called as I approached, not wanting to startle him. Ryan looked up, shading his eyes against the morning sun. "Olivia, I hope it's okay that I'm here. I'm meeting with your events coordinator later about designing the new pavilion." "Of course." I joined him on the dock, sitting a comfortable distance away. "I forgot that was today." We sat in surprisingly easy silence for a moment, watching the light play across the water's surface. "The gala looked like a success," Ryan commented. "I saw some photos online." "It was," I confirmed. "We exceeded our fundraising goal for the year." He nodded, genuine approval in his expression. "You've done something remarkable here, Olivia. Transformed this place into something meaningful." "Thank you," I said, accepting the compliment without deflection. "It's been a journey." Ryan studied me for a moment. "You seem happy, settled." "I am, mostly," I acknowledged. "Still figuring some things out, but aren't we all?" "Some more than others," he said with a rueful smile. "But yes, I suppose that's the human condition." Another comfortable silence fell between us. It was strange how time had transformed our relationship, from lovers to enemies to these occasional moments of genuine connection. Not friendship, exactly, but something approaching mutual respect. "I heard you and Nathan might be exploring something beyond friendship," Ryan said eventually, his tone carefully neutral. News traveled fast in Cedar Cove. "We're having dinner tonight. An actual date, not work-related." Ryan nodded slowly. "He's a good man. He was there for you when—" He trailed off, not needing to specify when. "Yes, he was," I agreed. "But that's not why. It's more complicated than gratitude." "The best relationships usually are," Ryan said, surprising me with his insight. "Complicated, I mean. Built on multiple layers of connection." I studied him, noting how much he'd changed from the man I'd once planned to marry. "When did you get so wise about relationships?" He laughed softly. "Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. Turns out when you betray someone you love and destroy multiple relationships in the process, you have quite a bit to work through. The frankness of his response was refreshing. And have you worked through it? Some days I think so, he said thoughtfully. Other days not so much. But I'm trying. And that counts for something, I hope. It does, I assured him, meaning it. As Ryan left for his meeting and I continued my morning inspection of the property, I reflected on how differently this scene would have played out a year ago, or even 6 months ago. The anger that had once defined my relationship with both. Ryan and Madison had gradually transformed into something more nuanced, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of acceptance that allowed us all to move forward. That evening, as I prepared for my dinner with Nathan, I found myself thinking about the children's book I'd written for little Olivia. In the story, the gardens of Willowbrook had magical properties, helping the protagonist find her way through difficult times. It was a simple narrative, designed for a child, but it contained an essential truth I'd discovered through my own experience. Growth often comes in unexpected places, from soil we never intended to cultivate. My sister had stolen my boyfriend and wedding venue. What happened at her rehearsal dinner had indeed changed everything, but not in the way any of us could have predicted. The revelation of betrayal upon betrayal had forced us all to confront hard truths about ourselves and each other, beginning a process of destruction and reconstruction that continued to unfold. As I put the finishing touches on my outfit for the evening, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered her fiancé and sister together, nor was she the one who had plotted elaborate revenge at any cost. She was someone new, shaped by pain but not defined by it, cautious but not closed off, stronger in some ways and more vulnerable in others. I was still discovering who she might become. And for the first time, in a very long time, I was genuinely curious to find out. 3 years had passed since that first dinner with Nathan. The early summer morning glowed with promise as I stood on Willowbrook's main terrace, watching workers arrange chairs on the lawn below. The white seats formed perfect rows leading to a flower-covered arbor that stood where I had once planned to say my vows to Ryan. Today, I would stand under that arbor with Nathan. "There you are," Chloe's voice came from behind me. "I've been looking everywhere. The florist needs final approval on the centerpieces, and your mother is reorganizing the reception seating chart." I smiled, unsurprised. "Tell Mom the seating arrangements are fine as they are, and I trust your judgment on the centerpieces." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "You're suspiciously calm for someone getting married in 5 hours." "I've planned enough events here to know that something will go wrong, and it probably won't matter," I said, turning back to the view. "Besides, I've already had one wedding that didn't happen. Puts things in perspective." My casual reference to the past no longer carried the sting it once had. Time had softened those edges, transforming painful memories into something I could acknowledge without reliving the hurt. "Still," Chloe persisted, "most brides would be at least a little nervous." "Who says I'm not?" I countered. "I'm just channeling it productively. I've already reviewed the weather forecast twice and confirmed the backup plan if those clouds decide to do more than threaten." Chloe laughed. "There's the Olivia I know. Come on. Madison's arrived with little Olivia. She's dying to show you her flower girl dress." In the bridal suite, formerly Willowbrook's master bedroom now repurposed for wedding preparations, I found Madison helping her daughter twirl in a pale blue dress that matched the wedding color scheme. "Aunt Vivi!" 3-year-old Olivia spotted me and launched herself into my arms. Though she could now manage my full name, she still preferred the nickname from her babyhood. "Look at you," I said, admiring her dress as I set her down for another spin. "You're the most beautiful flower girl ever." Madison smiled, watching her daughter. "She's been practicing her petal-dropping technique all week. The living room is covered in flower petals." "Perfect technique," I assured my niece, who beamed with pride. Madison studied me with a knowing look. "You've been up on the terrace again, haven't you? Supervising the setup?" "Just observing," I defended myself. "Nathan banned me from giving the staff directions." "Smart man," Madison laughed. "That's why you're marrying him." "One of many reasons," I agreed, as Madison helped her daughter practice her flower girl duties one more time. I took a moment to appreciate how far we had come. The sister who had once betrayed me in the most painful way possible was now my maid of honor. Her daughter, my flower girl. The venue where I had once planned to marry Ryan was now the site of my wedding to Nathan, not as an act of reclamation or revenge, but because Willowbrook had become genuinely meaningful to us both. Life had a strange way of circling back, offering second chances in unexpected forms. My mother arrived, elegant in her mother-of-the-bride outfit, still fussing about the seating arrangements. "Olivia, are you sure we should seat Ryan at table 7? It's so close to the head table." "Mom, we've been over this," I said patiently. "Ryan is Nathan's colleague now. They work together 3 days a week. It would be strange not to include—" "Here?" My mother sighed. "I just want everything to be perfect for you, sweetheart." I hugged her, appreciating the sentiment despite the unnecessary worry. "It will be perfect because I'm marrying the right person this time." The subtle emphasis on "this time" wasn't lost on my mother. She patted my cheek gently. "Yes, you certainly are." The next few hours passed in a flurry of hairstyling, makeup application, and final dress adjustments. Throughout it all, I maintained the calm that had surprised Chloe earlier. It wasn't that I didn't care about the details. The Willowbrook wedding package I'd designed myself was nothing if not detail-oriented, but rather that the details felt secondary to the fundamental rightness of marrying Nathan. Our relationship had developed gradually, built on friendship, mutual respect, and shared purpose. After our first official date, we had taken things slowly, both aware of the complicated history I brought to the relationship. Nathan had been patient, understanding that trust wouldn't come easily after what I'd experienced with Ryan. His steadiness had given me space to heal while discovering who I wanted to be beyond the woman defined by betrayal and revenge. As my father arrived to escort me to the ceremony, I took one final look in the mirror. The woman reflected back was familiar yet transformed, still recognizably the Olivia who had once walked in on her sister and fiancé, still the woman who had purchased Willowbrook in anger, but also someone new who had built something meaningful from the ruins of her former life. "Ready?" my father asked, offering his arm. I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for the journey that had led me here. More than ready. The ceremony was everything I hadn't allowed myself to hope for 3 years ago. Intimate, joyful, genuine. Little Olivia scattered her flower petals with enthusiastic precision. Madison stood beside me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Nathan waited under the arbor, his expression a mixture of awe and certainty that settled any lingering nervousness I might have felt. As we exchanged vows, I was aware of the symmetry and contrast with what might have been. Same venue, different groom, same sister standing beside me, but in a relationship transformed by honesty rather than deception. The past and present overlapped, in a way that felt not painful but meaningful, each experience having shaped the moment we were now creating. During the reception, I found a quiet moment alone with Madison on the terrace where I had stood that morning. The celebration continued below, the evening lights transforming Willowbrook into a magical landscape of soft illumination and shadow. "Happy?" Madison asked, handing me a glass of champagne. "Immensely," I confirmed, though I keep thinking about how different things could have been. Madison nodded, understanding without explanation. "If you hadn't walked in on Ryan and me that day, if I hadn't been pregnant with Jason's baby, if you hadn't bought Willowbrook for revenge." "So many turning points," I agreed. So many moments where everything changed. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the guests below. Ryan was visible at his table, engaged in conversation with colleagues from the architectural firm. Jason was dancing with little Olivia, holding her up so she could twirl without getting dizzy. Nathan was speaking with my parents, his ease with them a testament to how fully he had been accepted into our complicated family. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked suddenly. "What happened with Ryan?" Madison considered the question seriously. "I regret how we hurt you," she said finally. "That will always be true. But regret the actual outcome?" She shook her head. "If things hadn't happened exactly as they did, I wouldn't have Olivia. I wouldn't have found my way to Jason. You wouldn't have created the foundation or found Nathan." She gestured toward the celebration below. "None of this would exist." "That's very philosophical of you," I observed, surprised by her insight. Madison smiled. "I've done some growing up these past few years. We both have." It was true. The pattern we had fallen into since childhood, Madison the emotional one needing protection, me the responsible one expected to handle everything, had gradually shifted as we'd each discovered strengths and vulnerabilities that didn't fit those narrow roles. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it. "Of the mother you've become, the artist, the person." Madison's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you," she said simply, then with a touch of her old mischievousness. "Though, I'm still terrible at paperwork and organizational systems. Some things never change." I laughed, the sound carrying over the terrace. "That's why you have me, and Willowbrook's very efficient administrative staff." Our moment of sisterly connection was interrupted by Nathan's appearance at the terrace entrance. "There you are," he said, approaching with a smile. "They're about to serve dessert, and I've been instructed not to return without my bride." "Duty calls," Madison said, giving my arm a squeeze before heading back to the reception. "Congratulations again, both of you. You deserve every happiness." As she disappeared through the doorway, Nathan joined me at the railing. "Everything okay?" "Just taking a moment," I assured him. "It's been quite a day." "Having second thoughts?" he asked, the question light but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. I turned to face him fully, taking in the sight of my husband, the word still new and wonderful, in his wedding suit. "Not a single one," I said firmly. "Though I was just thinking about the strange path that led us here." Nathan nodded, understanding without explanation. He had been there for every step of that path after all, from the devastation of Ryan and Madison's betrayal through the evolution of the Willowbrook Foundation to the gradual healing of family relationships. "Life rarely takes us where we expect," he said, drawing me close. "Sometimes it takes us somewhere better." "Quite the optimist," I teased. "I married you, didn't I?" he countered with a smile. Clear evidence of my excellent judgment and positive outlook. As we returned to the reception, I found myself reflecting on the title of the children's book I'd written for my niece, Olivia's Garden of Dreams. The story I'd created for little Olivia had been about finding beauty and possibility in unexpected places. It was a simple narrative for a child, but it contained a truth I'd discovered through my own experience. Sometimes the garden we end up tending isn't the one we originally planted, but it can grow into something more magnificent than we had imagined. The evening progressed with toasts and dancing, cake cutting, and traditional moments captured by photographers. Through it all, I remained present in a way I might not have been able to achieve years earlier, when wounded pride and anger had dominated my emotional landscape. Now I could appreciate each moment for what it was, a celebration not just of Nathan and me, but of the journey that had brought us all to this place. Near the end of the reception, as guests began to depart and the evening wound down, I found myself approached by Ryan. He had kept a respectful distance throughout the event, his presence acknowledged but not emphasized. Congratulations, Olivia, he said sincerely. It was a beautiful ceremony. Thank you, I replied, genuinely appreciating his presence without discomfort. I'm glad you could be here. Ryan nodded, glancing around at Willowbrook's elegant surroundings. I never imagined when you bought this place that it would become all of this. The foundation, the community programs, and now your wedding venue. Neither did I admitted. Revenge has a way of transforming into something else if you let it. Into something better, he suggested. I considered this. Not necessarily better or worse, just different, more complex. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. You've always been insightful that way, seeing the complexity in situations where others might only see black and white. The compliment surprised me, both for its perceptiveness and for the absence of any awkwardness between us. Time had transformed our relationship from lovers to enemies to something approaching mutual respect. Not quite friendship, but a connection that acknowledged our shared history without being defined by it. Life is rarely simple, I said, especially when it comes to relationships. Speaking of which, Ryan gestured subtly toward where Nathan was saying goodbye to departing guests. You found someone who truly sees you, who values your strength, without expecting you to be invulnerable. The observation was unexpectedly astute, revealing how much Ryan had grown in his own understanding of relationship dynamics. Yes, I agreed simply. I did. As Ryan moved to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, Olivia, I'm glad things worked out this way. Not because it absolves me of what I did, but because you deserved better than what I could have given you. Back then. I watched him rejoin his colleagues, struck by the genuine goodwill in his words. 3 years ago, such a moment would have been impossible, the wounds too raw for any meaningful exchange. Now, it felt like a fitting closure to a chapter that had once threatened to define my entire story. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the cleanup crews had begun their work, Nathan and I took a final walk through Willowbrook's moonlit gardens. We would leave for our honeymoon the following day, but for tonight, we had decided to stay in the estate's recently renovated guest suite, rather than rushing off to another destination. Any regrets about having the wedding here? Nathan asked as we strolled hand in hand along paths illuminated by soft landscape lighting. Given the history? I considered the question seriously. No, I said finally. Willowbrook stopped being about Ryan and Madison a long time ago. It became something else, something ours. Nathan nodded, understanding without further explanation. It's become quite the symbol of transformation, both the place itself and what it represents for all of us. Symbolic psychology at its finest, I agreed with a smile. The physical embodiment of emotional growth. Now who's being philosophical? Nathan teased, pulling me close. As we continued our nighttime exploration of the grounds, I found myself drawn to the small lake at the property's edge. The moonlight reflected off the water's surface, creating a scene of otherworldly beauty. This spot, where I had once encountered Ryan during the early days of Willowbrook's renovation and where Nathan and I had later decided to formalize our relationship, seemed a fitting place to conclude our wedding day. 3 years ago, I said, sitting on the dock that extended into the lake, I couldn't have imagined this moment. Marriage felt like something that had been stolen from me, a future I'd lost. Nathan sat beside me, his shoulder warm against mine in the cool night air. And now? Now it feels like I found something better than what I lost. Not because losing it wasn't painful, it was, but because what came after was more authentic, more aligned with who I really am. Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering my words. You know, when I first saw you planning your revenge, buying Willowbrook, investigating Ryan and Madison, I was worried. About me? I asked, surprised. About what that path might do to you, he clarified. Revenge can consume people, change them in ways they don't expect. But you found a different way forward. I thought about the journey from betrayal to this moment. The anger that had initially driven me to purchase Willowbrook. The gradual transformation of that anger into something creative and meaningful. The slow rebuilding of trust with Madison. The unexpected joy of knowing my niece. I had help, I acknowledged, squeezing his hand. You never tried to talk me out of my revenge plan, but you also never let me lose sight of who I really was beneath all that pain. Nathan smiled, the moonlight silvering his profile. I always saw you clearly, Olivia. Even when you couldn't. See yourself. The simple truth of his statement settled around me, a comfortable weight of being known and valued for exactly who I was, strengths, flaws, and all the complexity between. As we made our way back to the main house, I took a final look at Willowbrook spread out before us. The historic mansion with its modern additions, the gardens where my niece loved to play, the gallery showcasing local artists, the education center that had become a community hub. What had begun as an instrument of revenge had evolved into a place of creation, connection, and purpose. My sister had stolen my boyfriend and wedding venue. What happened at her rehearsal dinner had indeed changed everything, but not in the way any of us could have predicted. The cascade of revelations and consequences that followed had forced us all to confront truths about ourselves and each other, beginning a process of destruction and reconstruction that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. 3 years later, I stood as a different woman, not defined by betrayal or revenge, but by the life I had consciously built from those difficult beginnings. Madison had found her own path to authenticity and purpose. Even Ryan had discovered growth through confronting his mistakes. We had all, in our different ways, been transformed by the events that began that day when I walked in on my sister and fiancé. The wedding that hadn't happened had led, through a winding and unexpected path, to the wedding that had just taken place, not as a replacement or substitution, but as something entirely new, built on stronger foundations of honesty and mutual understanding. As Nathan and I returned to the house that had once symbolized my pain and now represented our shared future, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with settling scores or finding justice. Life had dealt its own complex consequences and rewards, more nuanced than any revenge I could have planned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, continuing the story that had unfolded so unexpectedly. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath of celebration, I could appreciate the strange, painful, beautiful journey that had led us all here, to a place none of us had imagined, but exactly where we needed to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.